Hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Before we jump into our conversation, we would love to know from you, what is one wellness ritual or habit that you swear by, no matter what, or no matter like where you are in your health journey?
Okay, great question. First of all, thank you guys for having me. Looking forward to this conversation. So I would say the one ritual that I stick with the most is I do, and it depends on the season, but I'll do a cold shower in the morning. And then if I have enough time, I'll do a sauna. Otherwise, I get the fireplace going. And so I go like from cold shower to right in front of our fireplace. And it feels good. Now, I don't know that there's a lot of science that says like this is going to solve all your problems in life, but I love doing it.
Sounds nice.
Well, yes. And it's interesting that you do the cold first and then the sauna. Marnie and I have done, cold plunges and saunas, and I kind of like to get all hot and then get cold, but
good for you. I'm currently sitting on my warm PEMF mat right now.
So am I.
So nice.
Yeah.
There you go. I will say this though, for like, there are times like when it's like, it makes a warm shower feel so much better when if I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, I'm so stressed. Instead of going into the cold and being like, that's more stressful. If I just go like warm shower first thing in the morning, it's like 10 times better than just a normal warm shower that you would have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely need to go from warm to cold. Like if I'm doing the cold shower, I need to start warm and end on the cold. I can't do the reverse very well.
But you're right.
I have to work my way up to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And plus, like, by the way, in like August and September, it's super easy.
Oh, totally.
When you hit like January, like that's legit. I'm like it's like ice falling from the shower head.
Well, this week, with negative temps in Minnesota, we all live in Minnesota. It was brutal, mid-February with these cold temps. So good for you, Aaron. So let's dive in a little bit, and maybe you can walk us through and share your background and what led you to where you are today in a nutshell. We know you were a professional soccer player and went on to become a strength and conditioning coach before founding FitSpace. And now you're the author of The New Fit.
That's right. Fit Studio is the gym.
Yes. Sorry.
No, that's all right. So I'm an Iowa boy, grew up in Iowa. And then I got drafted to come play for what was called the Minnesota Thunder. That was our professional soccer team. Did that for 8 years, studied exercise science at Drake University, graduated, moved up here. When I retired from playing soccer, I stayed on as a strength and conditioning coach. And I enjoyed doing that. The team switched over to Major League Soccer for Minnesota United. Stayed on for 15 years doing that. At the same time, I owned and operated a boutique gym called Fit Studios. And that's my story.
So how has your approach to fitness evolved over the years? And I'm guessing that there are a lot of misconceptions out there floating around about what people have about training and longevity.
Yeah, there is so much out there. This is a great question because I would say when I first started working with people, I had them do what I did. And as a professional athlete, those training sessions were hard. So I think when I first started, probably for the first 10 years of my career, like if you would ask like, what's Fit Studio or what's Aaron doing? It probably was like, it is awful. You're going to throw up. You're going to be sore for a week. Like you actually have to train to go do a workout there.
Right,
I think that's sort of that was my MO for such a long time.
You were training little professional soccer players.
That's right. I know, that's right. After I hit the age of 40, things changed. And so things now look a lot different. And I've gone through some things that have been challenging for me health-wise. I was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago. And so that really that really changed my perspective on on what my approach was to work with people and to help them.
So how has that evolved? Like, how has your approach and how you've worked with people evolved? One, as we age, but then two, with your cancer diagnosis.
Well, one, as we age, I could see it happening. I could see injuries occurring. I could see overtraining occurring. I could not only see it in my community and the people that I was working with, but I started seeing it myself. And so I had to sort of, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, but I had to go back. I had to sort of rewind and go back to the basics and kind of pull from the science of how the body adapts and look at the way we train. And I had to make it more applicable to myself as I age. I specifically remember when I turned 40, it was the week I turned 40, I had, for the first time, I had like an injury, like a neck injury, one that, you like, if someone is like behind you and they ask you a question, you'd like turn your whole body, not just your head. It's just like a little tweak. But for the first time for me, I was like, this is like getting in the way of me training. Like, this is getting in the way of me like working out. And I sort of had this epiphany because it put me out for a week. It was the first time that had happened. And it was the first time I sort of connected like my movement practice, what I do for movement is so closely related to my emotional well-being that I really have to take a hard look at what I'm doing. Now, I break people up into two categories, overtrainers and undertrainers. And there's different characteristics that go along with each one of them. I'm an overtrainer. I'm someone who I'm constantly overdoing it. I will overtrain to the point of injury. And that was the first time I was like, if I don't figure this out, if I don't take care of myself in a meaningful way, it affects me emotionally. And that was eye-opening to me. So I would say I'm 51 now. So I'd say about 10 or 11 years ago, I dramatically changed the way I started working with clients, as opposed to like, just jump in and do the workout. Now I want to sit down. I want to know where you're at. What's your exercise history like? What are your comorbidities? What are you going through? What injuries do you have? And now let's do an assessment so that we can get you in the right starting place.
It sounds like you're really meeting your clients where they're at versus having them meet you where you're at.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's right.
It's interesting when you talk about the overtrainer and the undertrainer, because I actually think I'm both. I think that I have a tendency to overtrain because mentally I just want to keep going, train. But then sometimes, and this is something that we want to ask you about, it's like I hit, maybe it's like 80% or whatever it is, but I'm never breaking through to that like next level where I want to see results because I'm not pushing myself into my untapped potential, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So like, if we break this down just into like how the body works, like how do you adapt? How do you get stronger? How do you get leaner? How do you get faster? Whatever it is that you're looking for, there's really these 4 phases that go into this adaptation cycle. And the first phase is there has to be a stimulus. And stimulus meaning like, I want to be faster. Okay, you got to start running. Like, I want to be stronger. Okay, you got to start doing resistance training. Like, that's a stimulus. That's one. 2 is the stimulus has to cause fatigue. So it's got to be great enough that it causes fatigue. And I always say this, it should cause fatigue in 2 ways. One, it should be short-term fatigue. So that means I just completed a task. I'm out of breath. My muscles are fatigued. My heart is pounding. My hands are on my knees. That's short-term fatigue. Long-term fatigue means the next day I should be sore. I should be tired. So you have a stimulus, you have fatigue, you then need recovery. So then you have to nourish the body. You have to allow the body to recover. That's the hard part for people like us, because it's like, I don't need it. And then after that recovery, then the body adapts. The body begins to change. But if you break those steps down and you say like, hey, like a typical overtrainer, what happens is they skip the idea of recovery. They don't understand it for one reason or another. That's missing. And so then what happens is you start going to this black hole of training where like never reaching too high. I don't let myself recover enough. It's just sort of like very linear and steady. And the body doesn't adapt there. Likewise, with an undertrainer, they don't reach high enough. They don't need the recovery. And so they're kind of caught in the black hole too.
Marty, I think so last year, Marty and I trained for this endurance event, and it was our first major endurance event. And when we got the training plan, there are all these like rest days and recovery days. And I was like, this is too much. This is like less than I'm doing now, and I'm not even training for anything. But then I really started to appreciate as the training picked up and as I had a couple small injuries, I absolutely had to take those rest days. And I realized it was because I had overtrained that I was getting injured in the first place.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. The body will let you know too, by the way, right? Like if you're you're going to get injured, you're going to lose your desire to train. Yes.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Well, and it's also hard to know, like, how much do you need to recover and what is considered recovery? Like, is taking a walk in your neighborhood recovering, or is recovering like really doing nothing? And we're supposed to move our bodies every day, right? So like, it's hard to figure it all out.
It's hard to figure it all out. I have some guidelines that might be helpful.
Okay.
Well, first of all, like being present and like owning your own journey is the first step. So most of us, when it comes to fitness, what we do is we're like, that's what the plan says to do. That's what the coach says to do. That's what's written up on the whiteboard in the gym, whatever it is. Like, I'll just do it. I'm here. I'll just do it. And that it's just not a very active way to go through your fitness journey. And so I think stopping, reassessing, there's so many tools for this, right? I have an Aura ring. My Aura ring tells me, how did I sleep? What's my heart rate variability? There you go. Am I ready? Like that can help, but really just stopping and thinking about how you feel and what might be right. I think it's a good beginning to understand, like, when do I need rest? And then in general, I always tell people this, like, we're all so different. My daughter right now is training she wants to compete in the 800 meters. She wants to get into the conference meet for this spring for track and field. 16 years old. She can go 7 days a week. She can cut her arm off and it'll grow back the next day. For us, it's like, I have to err on the side, I have to know myself enough to err on the side of more rest and recovery. And so what I do is I say, well, what does a rest day look like? It should be 60%. 60% of what your really high day is like. It's a good rule for people to follow, especially people like me who are like, if you leave it up to me, a rest day is going to be 95%.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, I'm curious, you talked about like the overtrainers and the undertrainers. Talking a little bit about the undertrainers for a moment and how you kind of get into their psyche a bit as a coach, meet them where they're at and draw out. And you talk a little bit in the book about this. Like, it's really important for someone to enjoy the workout they're doing and not just follow the plan or do what their neighbor or their spouse or their friend is doing. But I've seen that, Marty and I are both health coaches, and there are individuals that really struggle to find a workout that they can do on a consistent basis that they really enjoy, that they can keep with for more than like a month.
Yeah. I want to clarify first that like an undertrainer is not someone who's not athletic. It's not someone who's not fit. That's different.
Okay.
And engaging someone on either end, what you talked about is the most important. And that's first principles of fitness, by the way, is find something that you're connected to. It can be whatever. Like, listen, my world's inside of a gym. That's like swinging kettlebells and doing burpees and running and doing intervals. But for a lot of people, that's not their starting point. Their starting point is, I love being outside. Let me go for a walk, right? Or I want to start hiking, or whatever it is. But you have to be passionate about it. I encourage people to always ask themselves this question when they're starting a movement practice, or if they're lost, or if they're stuck. Do you look forward to whatever it is you're going to do that day for movement?
Mhm.
If you don't look forward to it, it's the wrong thing. And you got to reassess. You got to find something you're connected to. This is what I say, like fitness is the best place in the world to look under the hood, to self-reflect, right? Like what a phenomenal opportunity, because the patterns that we have in our relationships, the patterns that we have at work, all those things, they will play themselves out under high stress situations in a gym setting, in a movement setting. And so it provides such a great opportunity for us to reflect on who we are and make changes. Safe place to make changes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Stephanie was asking about the what did you call them? Underachievers or whatever. But I think about it as more the person that's kind of doing their steady exercise, like you mentioned, but they're not changing their fitness in any way because they're just kind of staying maybe, I don't know, 70% or whatever it is. And they're not doing any of those like interval days or whatever you do to increase your speed.
Sure.
So how do you motivate someone like that, or get them to understand that doing, I remember back in the day, however many years ago, where like I would get on the Stairmaster for 40 minutes and just do this basic Stairmaster thing. And then that would be my workout. There were no highs, there were no lows. It was just like this steady state. And I thought I was doing amazing exercise.
I know, right? I know. And I always say any movement is better than no movement. So
right.
Move, for sure, move. So this is what I call the intensity gap.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to share a really quick study. So there's a study, University of Toronto did this study, and they took a group of people and they put them on a treadmill and they said, I want you to run at a moderate pace. And then they said, okay, now that you're at a moderate pace, now I want you to really ramp it up. And I want you to get to 93% of your max heart rate. So moderate pace is like, we can talk. 93% of max heart rate is like don't
Zone
talk.
5.
Like, I'm out of breath. I'm focused. Like, this is an awful experience. And so the majority of those people got to 73% of their max heart rate. And they were like, I'm there. This is it. Like, I'm at 93%. So there's a huge gap there that is very, very common. And it's common with a lot of people. If you don't have a background in sport or training, like, this is new. And by the way, that's scary. It's scary to feel your heart pound. It's scary to be out of breath if you've never done it before. And so what I do is two things. I encourage people to say, like, to understand what is capacity. What is that capacity look like? Whether that's heart rate or how much weight I can lift or how far I can run. Like, what is norms? What are norms for capacity? And I think that's important because norms are hard to find at our age, just so you know. I talk a lot about norms in the book, but so looking at norms. And then I would say, like, find ways to slowly get yourself towards what that capacity might be. Because I think what happens is a lot of people go like, either like, I'm not going to do it, it's too scary, or I'll just jump all the way in. And when I jump all the way in, that's too much. I don't want to feel sick. I don't want to feel out of breath. I don't want to feel dizzy. I'm done. And so really being aware of what norms are like for people over the age of 40 when it comes to performance, I think that's important. And then having a really good strategic plan to kind of close that intensity gap.
And would you say that's one of the benefits of working at a boutique gym like Fit or something similar where you have a coach and a trained,
100%. Yes,
PT or whoever, personal trainer to help push you? Because I think that's where rubber meets the road. Like, that's where doing something on your own and kind of the repetitive, like Marnie said, the Stairmaster. Back in the day, we were all doing that and we didn't have some of these resources. And now there's so many boutique gyms that will push you. And one, from a professional, and then two, just from the people around you. I think that can be really motivating as well.
Yeah.
But maybe
100%.
you can explain a little bit about the benefits of working with someone potentially. And maybe it's not every day, on a regular basis for months and months, but at least to figure out what is your max.
Yeah, that's right. I think that one, you mentioned a coach. I think we need coaches in all areas or a lot of areas of our life. We need help. not
Mhm.
just in nutrition and wellness, but there's
Yeah.
experts and there's people who care and they want to help us. And yes, that can be tremendously helpful. The other thing is there is community in fitness. And, this is probably, I think, one of this team, it's community, it's camaraderie, it's competition. This is probably this fits under the first principles of connection. I think when people can understand the use of community, they can become more engaged. And I think they can also learn how to close that intensity gap. The right type of culture in that community is really important. But yes, 100%. I think that's a big piece of it. Um, and we see that all over the fitness world, don't we? We see it in, your endurance race, like who are you training with? And then you show up and you put your toe to the mark and you're like, great. Who am I going against or who am I running with? And those are meaningful experiences that engage us and they teach us a lot. They teach us a lot about ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. The event that Stephanie and I did, the community was such a big piece of it for us.
Yeah.
We were incredibly sad when it ended because we loved the community so much that we were a part of. But just thinking about, I know Stephanie had asked you about the pieces of coaching and working with someone individually, but I'm just thinking about how I read through your book and I saw that, a person in my age range, if they want to be kind of in that intermediate range of fitness for the checkups, they should be running an 8:54-minute mile. And I think I'm like a very fit person, but my mile is not that fast. And I was so surprised by that. I don't know why, but I found it shocking actually. And I, have done quite a bit of running training, a lot of it zone 2 training, which I guess does not really increase your speed as much as I thought it did. But I'm just wondering, how does a person, get from A to B in their running, for instance, to get to that, healthy point for longevity?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I want to talk about a couple things. First of all, those norms. Those are surprising norms, aren't they? And I did a lot of work to sort of change the way that we see fitness or performance norms, because what we would typically look at in a gym setting is how much can you back squat or what can you deadlift or these numbers that are like common language to us. They sort of lose their meaning to 85% of the population who are they're I say back squat and they're like, what are you talking about? I've never done that before. And so what I did was I tried to find communities and cultures around the world, sort of like blue zones, that had studies done in them. And those studies showed the connection between longevity, functional longevity, and some form of related fitness. And the one that I liked the most, I like the running one that came from Levels, which is probably the number one website where people from all over the world can go and they can enter their times and distances on any run. They have a rowing version of it. The guy who runs the website, who started the website, has an algorithm that sort of spits out like these norms based on age and gender, which is really important.
That's awesome.
The one I really, and I'll get to your question, like how do I get better? But the one I really like is this sit to stand test performed by the Swiss government. 1 minute sit to stand test.
That's another one I was going to ask you about.
Yeah. So check this out. So this is really interesting. So sit to stand test, 1 minute. You sit to an 18-inch chair, you stand, you do that for 1 minute, you do it as many times as you can. Okay. The Swiss government, who by the way has like the complete reverse of what we have in the United States in terms of like what people are like in terms of engagement of activities. They have like 87% of their population over the age of 40, they're active. I think we have 17%, something in that range that are active. It's crazy. So they run this study, 7,000 participants. They ask all of them from the age of 40 to 64, 1 minute, how many times can you get up and down? And then they correlate that, which is called lower body strength. They correlate that over time with risk of all kinds of comorbidities. The one I remember off the top of my head is heart disease. And so the mean number, what most people were getting, was 50 squats in 60 seconds in an active community that are their, I think, third lowest healthcare costs in the world. They have third, their populations living top 3 in the world in longevity. And so now you're like, okay, now that means something because those people are doing something. And so 53 or 35% reduction in heart disease. So I was like, that's tangible. That means it's hard. I mean, if your listeners are like, what's that like? Pull out a chair and try and squat for a minute and see how many you get. But the average was, the mean was 50.
That's a lot. It seems like,
it's a lot. And to me, that was more meaningful than saying like, how much can you back squat or things like that.
For sure.
More and it's
relatable.
More functional.
Yeah.
More functional. That's right. It's more functional. So how do you get from A to B? Well, first of all, you got to start, you have to have the right starting spot. So I think the number is 93% of people who start a movement practice don't come back to it. After, I think 6 weeks is the longest. And one of those reasons is, well, A, it doesn't give you results that you thought you were going to get. B, it's boring. C, it's the wrong starting spot. It's too intense. So I think finding the right starting spot. So Marnie, you're you want to run a mile in 8:59. You're phenomenal at endurance work. This zone 2, we're going to go forever. I finished endurance race, but how do I look at like saying like, well, that's something I want to do? Well, it's individualized. It's specific to you. And so you have to know kind of where you're starting, and then a slow progression is the best way to do it. Now, specifically for training something like that, going like, I'm good at zone 2, I'm good at endurance work, but I really want to work on something that's a little bit shorter, more speed and more powerful. Just the quick science is, our bodies run on 2 systems really when it comes to metabolizing energy in general, aerobic, anaerobic. And anaerobic training is really hard to do. That's like the type of training where you're like, I'm out of breath, I'm sweating, like I said, hands on knees, lungs are burning. And those are intervals specifically that are like 2 minutes or less of, I'm talking like 90, 95% of max, true max. And so spending your time there, and by the way, my mom's 87 years old. She can spend her time there. She just walks uphill. I have to do it by getting on a treadmill and putting it at like, 10 or 11 miles per hour. That's how I get there. So the need doesn't change, but the way we get to that does change. And so to improve that specific piece that you're talking about, it's really time spent in that like zone 4, zone 5 training zone for shorter amounts of time, 2 minutes, 1 minute. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I did the VO2 max test recently, and, they get you into that zone at the end. And I just remember feeling like, oh, this is pure hell. Like, it's not fun with the mask on your face and the whole thing.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's awful, but it gives you good information.
Yes, it does, for sure. And then you just have to do it.
Then you just have to do it. That's right.
Yeah.
And the same applies for strength training, by the way. I mean, that's where I see probably the biggest gap in intensity. And by the way, the biggest myth in fitness is I'm doing strength training. Look at me. I'm doing yoga, right? I'm doing bar method. I'm doing whatever. All phenomenal ways to practice fitness. Amazing.
Great for mobility.
Ways. Great for mobility. Great for a ton of things. Keep doing them, please. But they're not true overload strength training practices, which is probably one of the biggest pieces that we need as we age.
So I wanted to dive into this because Marnie and we talk a lot about longevity, and we're big proponents of strength training. And I actually I think you sent an email, like a newsletter email not that long ago on this topic because it caught my eye. And I do see a lot of people, like even, okay, my parents, they're like, oh, we're doing strength training now. I mean, they're using like 5 and 8 pound dumbbells and they're down, I've seen them, it's like 10 minutes go by and then they're like, oh, we're back. And I'm like, okay, that's great. You're doing something, but like
it is
10 minutes and I'm so great. But can you kind of break down what strength training looks like? And maybe it's for someone in their 40s and 50s, and then maybe someone who's 70 or 80. Like, I'd love to know what your mom at 87 is doing.
Yeah.
And what do you need, and why activating your muscles in a certain way and maybe get to more failure, what that's doing for your body and your bone health and overall longevity versus just the little dumbbells.
Yeah. So let's break this down. So first of all, what you said is 100% right. Like, you're doing something, which is better than nothing.
Yes.
So yes, grab your 3 pound dumbbells and your 5 pound dumbbells and work for 10 minutes, 100%. This is my biggest beef with where we're at with strength training in general is, look at it like this. When I was a substitute teacher, and if I ever taught a math class, I knew I had to build the foundations of math. Someone had to learn addition and subtraction, division and multiplication. Then you could move on to, geometry. And the problem with strength training is it's the same idea. It's a skill, but you have to start at these basic foundational places. And now we're over 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old. And you're stepping into a world where most of the strength training is happening. And you're like, well, here's a barbell, here's a kettlebell. No one's ever really taught you what shapes or archetypes are the correct ways to move. So this is a starting place. So you talk about a coach. This is where you need a coach. You need someone to teach you the basic archetypes of how the body moves safely. And then you just start slow. You start with 5 pound dumbbells and 3 pound dumbbells, and then you progress really slowly as well. It takes 6 weeks. In my opinion, it takes 6 weeks for someone to develop a really good basic movement practice around strength. Sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I think the progression is where people stumble a lot.
That's right.
Like I have friends that are doing their same, movement routines that they've been doing for 30 years. Like, maybe they have, like Stephanie mentioned, the 10 pound dumbbells where they're doing the biceps and then they're going to solid core and, whatever. And then they're wondering why their bodies aren't changing, or they're changing in a way they don't like.
Yeah, that's right. And as we age, over the age of 40, we're losing 7% of our lean muscle every decade.
Right.
That's a lot.
So then it becomes even more important to strength train.
It becomes more important. So I think what people don't realize is, well, I've got my routine. I'm going to solid core. I'm doing whatever. All great. There has to be a progression, because net, as we age, if we just keep doing what we were doing before, we're losing. And we're not talking about like, hormone levels. We're not talking about bone density. All of these are on a pretty sharp decline for us. And so one of the ways that we can start to swing this naturally is through strength training. And just a couple really quick, hard and fast subjective rules is that really, to have this be impactful, starting with a load that is 30% or more of what we would call your 1 repetition maximum is enough to begin to create some change. So that means, so for people who are listening, that's like, if I would take a weight and let's say you want to do an arm curl, if you could do it, let's say 10 to 15 times and it was getting hard to do, that's probably about 40, maybe 45% of your 1 rep max is what we would call it. I mean, that's a good place to start.
Okay.
To really start to see changes in true strength, we would need to get you to like 70, 75% of your 1 rep max.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what would, and maybe we can dive into the book a little bit too, because you talk about, there's the fit test in there, the fit score, which, I think is super interesting, even for some, people that are active, and Marnie and I are active and consider ourselves to be in good shape, I looked at these and I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what I could do. Like I'm really curious. I want to do the mile and see if I can, I knew I used to be able to run a mile at that pace, but that was a long time ago. So maybe talk about some of these exercises and tests that you have in here. Because I think it's super helpful, and maybe even explaining like why some of these exercises are so important as we age, like the grip strength, and equate it to like practicality, right? Like it's not just about going to the gym for however long or working out for 30 to 40, 50 minutes a day. It's like, how do you want to live? Do you want to run around and chase your grandkids? Do you want to be able to prevent a fall when you're older and not break a bone? Like, because that directly impacts the quality of your life. And that sometimes I think helps people when they have a vision for how they want to live their life, then it helps them execute a new habit on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and I just want to add one thing to that.
Good.
One of the tests that like is in your book, and I've seen it lots of places, is, where you're getting up and down off the floor without touching any limbs to the floor. And I just like find that test infuriating. So if you could touch on that one too. And I can get down just fine. I can get down. But getting up, I do have to like kind of use my momentum to push myself forward, which I know you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
So
totally. So no, these are great questions. I find that test infuriating as well, because I have very little hip mobility.
Well, that makes me feel better.
Okay, so we're talking about this test, which is, by the way, all over the place, like you'd mentioned. It's this sit down to the floor, crisscross applesauce, stand back up, scored as follows. You get down, you get a certain number of points. The way you get up is you get up without using any appendage. So you're not supposed to rock. You're supposed to be able to stand straight up. You can't use the side of your leg. You can't use your hand. For each appendage that you use, it's minus 1 point. 5 points on the way down, 5 points on the way up. And so look, with all these tests, with all these fitness tests, they're designed to be functional, show you where you're at, and also not just show you where you're at, but like how they might affect your life. And so this is a test in mobility. It's a test in balance. And that's really all it is. It's that simple. And it's part of it's getting up and down off the floor. You look at the grip strength test. This is a test. Sure, there's science that goes behind it. It's related to the age of your DNA and your telomere length and all of these things. But really, ultimately, at the end of the day, what we see is that people who, are out in the garden, people who are doing manual labor, people who are, carrying heavy weights, they live longer. They have more lean muscle mass. And it's related to grip strength. One of the things that always drives me crazy is people find out they have low grip strength and they go get one of those hand, those hand grip strength things. And I'm like, really?
I'm pretty sure I have one.
I think my youngest son has one.
Okay. I mean, maybe it does something. I don't know the science behind it, but I do know that those tests are designed as functional tests to say like, hey, if you can find ways to get stronger, whether that's through swinging a kettlebell, doing burpees, doing push-ups, starting with a bar class, whatever it is, your grip strength will change. And that's going to improve your ability to hold on to your lean muscle mass as you age.
Right. It's just one way to measure that. It's not like all about just the grip strength.
So how does your fit score relate to that?
So yes, that's right. That's a good question. So there's obviously going to be holes in your fit score. For example, I'll use myself as example. I can no problem passing the endurance test. No problem passing the lower body strength endurance, the upper body strength endurance. I can do the grip strength test, but I cannot do the sit to rise test. So does that mean I'm an awful person and I'm bad? No. But it does show me that in my practice, I really have to work on mobility. I've got to find something that I'm connected to, whether that's starting a yoga practice or a bar practice, something like that. But those are the holes for me. And if I'm not willing to solve those holes, then what I need to do is find a way that I'm connected to solving those problems. Because if I don't, it might not have so much of an effect on me now. I definitely can see that having an effect on me more as I get into my later into my 50s, my 60s. And like I said, mobility is important. It's how we manage ourselves in space. It's how we get up and down off the floor.
Right.
Well, I think in the point of the fit test too that I like, I think what you're trying to touch on is we need some diversity, just like we need diversity in the food that we eat, right? Like eating only green vegetables, as great as they are, is not going to give you all the phytonutrients that you need. But diversity in your workout, because there's so many people that are just runners and they run every single day, like 5 to 7 days a week. And that's pretty much all they do. Maybe they pick up a few dumbbells, but think about how tight your muscles are then. Like if you need the flexibility, which is why, incorporating the yoga and the stretching and the mobility is so important. In addition to the strength training is so important.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I think we all get so locked into the things that we love to do or the things that we're used to doing when it comes to movement. And we get so locked into that we refuse or we find it too uncomfortable to do something that is not part of what we've built as our strength training practice. And so sometimes we have to be willing to tinker, experiment, do something that is not, part of our daily routine. Fitness becomes just a box that we check for so many of us that do have a movement practice, that we forget about this idea of like learning new skills. And that's key. I mean, when you guys started, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, Stephanie and I are experiencing that at this moment because we are training to do a rim to river to rim at the Grand Canyon. We've hired a coach. She has us doing things that we don't necessarily want to be doing. And we kind of fought it in the beginning because we both like our routines that we're already in. And she's like, listen, like, I know what I'm doing. You need to try this. You need to, I'm helping you build the muscles that you need to do this hike that you guys are going to do. And, I mean, it's basically what you're saying in different words, but like we all kind of get into our exercise rut, exercise routine, whatever it is. And I do think that once you kind of step outside of that and do something new, especially if you're working with a coach who really understands what your goal is, it can be very beneficial to you.
Yeah, it can be. That's right.
And I think that is the benefit of working with a coach and going to a more boutique studio.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your book? And, I know that you're trying to inspire the readers to own their fitness, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, their longevity. What would you say is the heart of what you want readers to get out of the experience?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I want people to get to a place where they understand their movement practice and what it means to them. So let me make that make sense. So many of us get stuck. And I think the biggest takeaway after doing this for 25 years is helping people look, you want to train for, I think you guys agree with me, you want to train for a marathon, you want to, learn how to lift weights. You can do all this by going online and you can find the skills that you need. The missing piece for people and fitness is the connection, the relationship, the meaning, the community, the camaraderie, whatever it is. And again, I'll go back to this, is that being isolated or not having a community or not having a coach is really hard. When you feel connected to your movement practice, and I talk a lot and I share a lot of personal stories with people that I've worked with in the past. When you feel connected to your practice, you really can create something that's sustainable. It's dynamic. It changes. And so I really try and help people understand, because that's how I have seen people get unstuck, is when they're willing to kind of reconnect, take a look at why they have gotten stuck and where they're stuck and how to undo that. That's where I see people change.
I love, Marnie, I couldn't agree more with that. And you brought up community and being connected to something. And that's something we talk about all the time on the podcast. And we have this, community vitality reboot, which is a liver detox and more. And it's doing these things together in community, and where you have someone to kind of unpack what's holding you back and get unstuck. I love that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Aaron, I know we're going to have to start to wrap up this conversation. And there's so much to unpack. We did want to ask briefly, and maybe you could just kind of in a nutshell, maybe this is another conversation for another day too. You mentioned your cancer diagnosis early on in this conversation and how that affected your fitness, and maybe just advice you have for anyone, because we are all of the age that unfortunately friends, family, loved ones are having these cancer diagnoses. And maybe just a little tip or nugget that you could share.
Yep.
Or inspiration.
Yep. So listen, there's 1.8 million of us in the U.S. are going to be diagnosed with cancer this year alone. Everybody knows, everyone's either had a cancer diagnosis or they know somebody who has personally. It's part of our world. It's part of our life. What's happening now is the research that we have seen take place over the past 20 years when it comes to exercise and cancer is now finally coming to the surface. And so what we used to be told was, you have cancer, you're going to go through treatment, rest, save your energy. And what we know now is that in all three phases of cancer, rehab, getting ready for treatment, getting ready for surgery, during treatment, even during treatment, and then in survivorship, after treatment, movement is medicine. And it is so true, because the research backs it up. And I think we are at the very beginning of seeing the tide change, where our oncologists are now starting to understand how impactful, as an adjuvant treatment, just like chemo, just like radiation, just like hormone therapy, how impactful exercise can be. And so I want people to understand. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it has to do with getting more oxygen in the cells, correct?
Oh, there's so much there. Yes, there's a lot that has to do with oxygen in the cells. There's a lot that has to do with, your VO2 max is directly correlated to your ability to tolerate chemotherapy. And so if you look at chemo it's poison and it's hard for people to tolerate. The problem is that if we can't get the right dose of chemo, we can't fight cancer in the right way. The higher my VO2 max, the more chemo I can tolerate, and the more survivorship there is. It's actually pretty amazing. And this has to do with, you're right, it has to do with how much oxygen we can get in the cell. It has to do with how much lean muscle we have. It has to do with our blood glucose levels. There's so much there.
I feel like that could be a topic. Yes, topic
exactly.
It's such a fascinating topic. Much of the work I'm doing right now is I'm working with a nonprofit called Active Against Cancer. They have 24 hospitals. It's a Norwegian nonprofit. They have 24 hospitals in Norway that they have integrated cancer patient only gyms into over the past 16 years, and they are leading the research. We're going to open our first cancer patient only hospital in New Jersey this summer.
That's really cool. So we might have to have you come back and talk more just about cancer and exercise oncology, and that topic could be very interesting. But as we wrap up this conversation, where can our listeners find the New Fit and learn more about your gym and your work that you're doing?
Yes. You can Instagram, probably best on Instagram. It's Aaron-Leventhal. You can head to my website, which is aaron-leventhal.com. You can hit me up on the website with an email. I'm happy to, I do a free consultation with anyone. So I'm here to help. So feel free to reach out.
And
Great.
we'll link all that up in the show notes.
So Aaron, one final question we love asking all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
Art of living well. Okay. Here's my answer. The art of living well means being emotionally available to the people in my life that I care the most about. And being able to be emotionally available is very closely linked to how I take care of myself so that I can be present and available for them. That is my nutrition. That's my lifestyle. That's my fitness. And it's my overall health.
I love
that. Was beautiful. I couldn't agree more. And I don't think anyone has said it quite. I mean, we've been asking this question for 5 years.
Well, I've listened to your podcast, so you didn't surprise me.
So you had a tip that we may ask you this question.
So you prepared your answer.
Yeah. But you're right. I'm thinking about myself right now. You are so right. Yeah, well, this has been great. And like Marnie said, the whole cancer and fitness and ecology, like we definitely would love to have you back on when once you've been part of this, nonprofit and you're opening up these gyms in the US and elsewhere. So thank you so much.
You guys, thanks for having me. You guys are great.
Thank you. Spread the word.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
Hey, and one quick tip for all of you guys out there listening. If this resonated with you, please share it with a family or friend or loved one, but come on our podcast and do a health transformation audit. So if you're feeling a little stuck, like Aaron said, and you're looking to increase your strength or maybe improve your mile, whatever it is, come on our show and we will help you get unstuck and unpack what's holding you back. And you'll walk away with a tangible action step to get one step closer.
Just go to our website, theartoflivingwell.us, and click the link to sign up. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.